The abandoned town of Grapevine had a way of lying. From the highway, it looked like a postcard. Angled rooftops, a church steeple, a diner with a neon coffee cup that hadn't glowed in 20 years. But when Officer Daniel Mercer rolled past the rusted welcome sign for his night shift check, the place folded itself into shadows and broken glass. Wind moved down Main like it had somewhere to be. A stoplight swung and clicked on a dead intersection. He logged the time, 1:11 a.m., and told dispatch he'd be doing a slow loop, eyes on the old mine road, usual checks. The cruiser's radio was a steady hush of static. He liked that. Quiet meant no calls, no arguments, just him and the skeletal grid of streets. He parked beside the diner for a foot patrol, tires grinding over bottle caps. The air smelled faintly sweet, like old bleach. He stepped out, adjusted his chest cam, clicked his mag light. The beam turned dust into snowfall. Unit 12 copy. The voice came clean through the radio, low and tired, clipped with routine. His voice. Mercer froze, one hand on the radio mic. He hadn't spoken. He looked back at the cruiser, the dome light glowing like a small moon. It could have been a playback glitch, a clip from earlier. The department ran old gear. "Dispatch, Unit 12, he said, forcing calm. "I'm at Grapevine, Main, and Cedar. Do you have my last transmission?" "Unit 12, we read you," came the real dispatch, bored and warm. "Last we got was your 111, you're clear." Static returned, soft as breath. He swallowed. The wind ran its fingers along a row of tin signs. He told himself it was nothing and angled toward the diner's alley. Graffiti flaked off in curls. A sagging boil water notice from a decade ago clung to a corkboard. The radio crackled. His voice again, exactly his. "Grapevine, Main, and Cedar. Show me out on a foot patrol." He stopped so fast, his boots rasped. He hadn't said that this second. He had said it minutes ago. He reached for the mic and didn't press it. He just listened. "Left hand on the brick," the voice continued, and he realized his left hand was on the alley wall, fingers in a groove where a missing mortar bead had left a perfect notch. Right foot on the beer cap. He looked down. A skull cap winked in his flashlight, crushed into the concrete exactly beneath his boot heel. "Okay," he whispered to the empty alley, to his own pulse. "Okay." There was a radio tower on the ridge north of town, a relic emergency repeater the county never got around to pulling. Sometimes, when atmospheric conditions were weird, you'd catch out-of-state truckers or a church service 2 towns over. Maybe he'd caught himself. A short bounce with seconds of delay. Maybe. It couldn't anticipate his hand, his foot. He kept walking. The alley bent into the back lot of the diner. A metal door buckled inward, yellow tape crisscrossed and peeled. On the chalkboard near the kitchen entrance, someone had written a menu and never erased it. Wednesday, meatloaf. He reached for the radio again, didn't press, and the voice said, Don't key up." The fear that rose in him was clean, cold, very specific. His own voice knew him too well. He stood in the strip of alley between the diner and the old Rexall, hands not moving, breathing through his nose. The radio hiss softened, like it was thinking. "Then, Mercer, listen. There are 7 streetlights working in Grapevine. Count them." He did, ridiculous as it felt. Main had 3, the church had 1, Cedar had 2. The gas station sign flickered. It counted as 1 more. 7. He hadn't counted earlier. He hadn't noticed. He told the air, "What are you?" Wind lifted a paper cup that skittered and spun. The radio clicked like someone had tapped the mic with a fingernail. "You know the tower," his voice said. "You'll try to go there. Don't go alone." He wanted to laugh. He was alone. Everybody else had a county line and a bed. The road out of town was a single black ribbon. He could call for backup, wait an hour, wait two. He could sit in the cruiser with the doors locked and the heater on, pretend he didn't hear himself. But the town waited, and the voice felt like a hook in his ribs. He swept the beam across the lot one more time. The kitchen door sighed in the wind. Far off, the mine's vent stacks knocked, and something metallic clanged like a dropped pan. Then the voice said, flat and precise, "Daniel, do not look up." He looked up. The second-story window of the diner was a rectangle of colder dark. In his flashlight, the glass didn't reflect, it absorbed. A shape stood behind it, shoulders and head, and a hand lifted like it was holding a radio mic to its mouth. His mouth, his hand. It spoke through the cruiser radio downstairs, in the exact cadence he'd use if his heart hurt and he didn't want to let it show. "There's someone on the stairs." If this kind of true-style horror chills you, tap subscribe so you catch the next watch. What would you do in his place? He didn't remember crossing the lot, only the shock of his shoulder hitting the diner's back door and the coil of police tape giving way. The kitchen smelled like damp flour and cold iron. His flashlight made ceiling fans into big, dumb shadows. He moved through the prep line with his gun down, but ready the way they drilled it, every corner a perishable question. His radio whispered like a shell at the beach. "Check the walk-in," it told him, in his own voice, weary and urgent. "You'll hate what's on the floor." There was a walk-in freezer door at the far end, stainless steel, scarred, with boot prints. Red spray paint had once read, "Condemned," but the letters were half melted, as if they'd been washed and never fully returned to the world. He paused at the handle. "Dispatch, Unit 12, he said, unable to help himself. "How copy?" Loud and clear came the soft reply. "What's your status, 12? "Investigating the diner." "Maybe a trespasser." He hesitated. The next words would sound foolish if anyone replayed them later. He said them anyway. "Possible feedback on repeater. I'm hearing myself a beat." "Say again?" "Stand by." His left glove made a quiet rubbery squeal on the handle as he pulled. Cold rolled over him. His light found shelves stripped of boxes, rime feathering the corners. On the floor lay a reel-to-reel tape machine, the size of a small suitcase, grey metal pitted with rust. The reels turned very slowly, as if muscle memory survived in the motor after decades asleep. There was no cord. A dead battery pack was duct-taped to the side, plastic gone white with age. A thin ribbon of tape moved past the heads, whispering. He leaned closer. The tape carried voices, not voices, a voice his, layered so tight it fuzzed at the edges. Door opens, light enters, his voice murmured, left hand raises. "Watch the step, watch the..." He drew back in time to catch his heel on a lip of concrete and pinwheel one arm to keep from going down. The machine said, almost amused, edge. His light snagged on something propped against the far wall. A badge, his badge number. It wasn't his badge. His was clipped to his chest, cool with sweat. This one sat on a blank grey vest panel, the kind you would Velcro to a carrier. His number stared at him like a date on a stone. "Okay," he breathed again, to the floor, to the cold. The tape hissed and a new layer threaded in, drier, older, as if it came from a long way down a hallway. "Mercer, you don't have a minute." The words were the same voice, but it carried a rasp he didn't have yet. "Stairwell. Tower. 0317. He snapped his gaze to his watch. 2:59. "When you go," the voice continued calmly, like a field training officer cataloging a scene, "you'll feel it at your ribs first. You'll think it's panic. It isn't. Don't take the stairs with your mouth open. Breathe slow." He wanted to stand very still until morning and let the sun iron the world flat. He wanted to laugh until it turned into something else. Instead, he pressed the mic key. The click sounded too loud. "Dispatch," he said. "I need a unit rolling to Grapevine to meet me at the North Radio Tower. Unknown situation at the diner. Possible trespassers. I am not, repeat, not code 4. Copy Unit 12," dispatch said, immediately brisk. "Nearest is Unit 8 out of Cedar Bend. 27 minutes, he got out of the freezer, out of the kitchen. He needed outside air." The street had the metallic quiet of an empty refrigerator. He set a course for the Ridge Road. His boots found tracks in dust that matched his tread pattern exactly, but there were places where the prints overlapped, like someone had walked himself into a corner and kept going. The tower was a skeleton against a rim of mountain. Up close, it smelled like mouse nests and hot aluminum even in the cold. The maintenance shack at its base had a door with a push-button lock that wasn't locked. Inside was dust, a coffee cup with the county logo, a logbook puffed fat with moisture. His light haloed his gloved hand as he opened the book. The last entry was in his handwriting. The date was tonight. The time was 3:12. The words read, "Don't open the freezer." A noise moved above him. Metal flex, shoe on ladder rung. He tilted the beam up the stairwell. The light ran up through the throat of the tower, catching the grating of each landing, making a vertical tunnel of shadow and old bolts. The radio on his shoulder whispered in his voice, gentle as a lullaby, "You're going to hear something now that sounds like a tape." "It isn't a tape. What is it?" he asked to the empty doorframe. "It's the last thing you'll say." His watch read 0314. The next transmission came crisp, and the words were so plain they scraped. At 0317, Daniel Mercer stops breathing in the tower stairwell. If this unnerved you, hit like and tell me where you would have turned back. Your comments help me choose the next case. He climbed. The steps were a clatter of old steel and grit. Every breath felt printed, as if he were moving along a template someone else had laid down. Halfway up, the air changed, colder, thinner, threaded with that sweet chemical note he'd tasted in the diner. The mines under Grapevine had burned slow for years, a subterranean fever. They'd vented them through stacks that still ghosted the ridge. Carbon monoxide, a training slide warned, binds to blood like a jealous thing and won't let go. Slow, his radio advised, the way you advise yourself in the mirror before a tough day. Shallow breaths. Count to 4 in, 4 out. He did. The beam of his light jittered. He was sweating, even though the air could have bitten his knuckles. Below him, the shack's doorway was a coin of darkness. Above, the ladder throat narrowed to a stenciled hatch. He kept climbing and came to a landing with a breaker panel. A dangling tag read, "Emergency power, solar add-on, 2009. He threw the lever. Nothing changed. The radio hiss persisted, a tide that had learned his name. The next landing bore a little metal box, the kind you'd slap over a phone line, and a tangle of cokes. A handheld radio lay there, old and ugly, taped to the shelf. Its battery had bloomed into a white crust a decade ago. The earpiece wire went nowhere. Yet, in his shoulder mic, his voice murmured, "You see it now. You see how it talks." He pictured the line diagram he'd glanced at in some county binder years back. The civil defense repeater, designed to capture and rebroadcast emergency traffic so no one died alone in the hills. Maybe it recorded too. Maybe it stored little slivers of fear wherever the wind piled them. Maybe Gravine's empty houses, its mile of quiet windows, had become echo chambers, and the tower just stitched them into something that sounded like help. He said, "If you're real, if you're me, tell me something I don't know." A pause. The radio crackled like palm over a mic. Then, "You never told Dad you kept the key from when he left. It's in the shoebox with the bowling patches." His throat closed. The fact rang with a dull bell sound in his chest. He hadn't spoken it out loud. You didn't need a ghost for a secret to do damage. You just needed the right shape of silence. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, then help me." "Turn off the repeater," the voice said. "It doesn't stop what happens, but it stops the next man from hearing it." His watch read 3:16. He pushed up the last narrow rung, legs trembling, tongue heavy. At the final hatch, he met his breath in short, coin-sized puffs. He killed the breaker at the top by brute force, the metal lever stiff, then tearing free with a spasm that shot rust across his gloves. The tower stilled. The whisper in his radio guttered, then steadied again like a pulse that wouldn't give up. "Not that one," the voice said apologetically. "Main's in the base. You have to go down." Of course it was. He turned, and the world tilted oddly left, a heat behind his eyes blooming like a bad idea. He took the first step down. His left knee buckled, struck steel, ringing. He caught himself on the rail. The taste of pennies filled his mouth. "Daniel," the voice said, not unkind, and with a note of somebody who'd already watched this once. "You've got 30 seconds. He thought of the 7 working streetlights, the diner chalkboard, the reel-to-reel machine that spun without power, as if the past could move itself forward by sheer insistence. He thought of the badge on the freezer floor and the logbook entry in his hand. Somewhere below, a footstep sounded. His or not his, impossible to say. He kept going, one hand, then one foot, rails greasy under his gloves. 0317. A cold pressure loomed under his sternum. Not pain, exactly, the absence of permission. The stairwell seemed to telescope, the square of the shack doorway drawing away. "Dispatch," he said into the mic, surprising himself with how steady it sounded. "This is Unit 12 at Gravine Tower. If you're recording, make sure..." His voice cut in and finished for him. "Make sure somebody pulls the main at the base, even if the lights are still on." He laughed, a short, breathless burst that fogged nothing at all. He reached the landing and missed the last step. He landed on one knee, then a shoulder, the mic grinding under him. The radio went silent for half a second that felt like a clean page. Then, very softly, like a hand on the back of the neck, came a whisper, "Thank you." The breaker at the base went down beneath his glove. He didn't remember pulling it. He only knew that the tower's hum left the air like a held breath, finally given back. Gravine became simply a dark town in a cold valley again. The radio died, a flat line. Lights moved on the highway far below. Blue, then red, then blue, slow as distant fireworks. In the stairwell's square of night, he watched the colors spill and fade across the gravel lot, wash the diner's sign, stroke the church door. He thought about the key in the shoebox. He thought about the way the mine vents whispered and how easy it was for a place to keep talking after everyone left. His chest felt light, like paper, like a thing that could float. The officers who reached Grapevine at 3:41 found the maintenance shack open, the breaker off, the logbook on the desk turned to a page with his handwriting on it, the words thin and slanted. "If you hear me, don't answer, leave." They played back his body cam later, of course. The climb, the quiet, the last request, clear as the click of a switch. Make sure somebody pulls the main. The audio tech swore there were two voices for a second, a doubling, same timbre, same breath. When he tried to scrub the clip, the second track vanished each time he looked for it, as if the replay itself refused to admit it had ever contained a loop. Weeks passed. Gravevine's tower stayed dark. The county finally put chain and lock on the fence. The mine vents kept breathing like sleeping animals. Sometimes on certain nights, when the weather stacked in layers and the wind carried sound in odd pockets, a hunter in the hills would claim he'd heard a police unit call a crossroads no one used anymore. He'd say the voice sounded familiar in that way a mirror does. If you heard it, what would you do? Answer or keep walking? If stories like this keep you up, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, should Grapevine stay silent or do we go back?